Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. I do believe this is the 26th video in our Master Series and the 13th video in our editing phase. Tonight we're going to deal with waveform density problems and things like tuz, does, fuzz, cuz, sibilance, shibilance, plosives, and things like that. The first thing that you need to get in your head is sometimes you want to fuss with this stuff and sometimes you don't. And you're going to have to get used to trusting your judgment. Just because it's become a big thing to fuss with this stuff doesn't mean that you should, because it's part of the performance that his k or it's part of the performance. Don't fuss with it. You know, you're going to ruin the performance by screwing with this stuff and making it to where it doesn't sound good because, you know, you've ruined part of the performance. It was actually part of the performance. So be real careful of that and be very mindful of that as you practice working on correcting these type of issues. So just keep that in mind. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is that the actual issues themselves. Things like tuz. Here's a tuh. We're visualizing it, you've listened to it, and you can see it. You can actually see the difference in the waveform. I mean, it's real obvious. You come to things like that, the tuz there, and you come to like duh. You know, duh, in the mic, you can see it. You can see that the broken waveform and kind of what it looks like. And you come to things like fuzz. You can see, look at the waveform density as compared to the other waveforms around it, that you can really see this falling. You can see it. I mean, it's real obvious. It looks really quiet, but it's not, because these dense waveforms can be very loud. You'd be very surprised how much you can attenuate them. When you do, they're almost invisible and they sound fine, but they look like you've attenuated the way them completely to where there isn't even a waveform there, because they're very dense waveforms. Cuz, the same thing. Look at this cuh. You see how broken that is. I mean, it's very easy to visualize them and to be able to see them. Look at this. If you look at this, and I've gone around here, this is that sibilance. Look at the other waveforms around it. That how broken they are and how they kind of, you know, open like that, where it looks like a big old gnarly monster, bro. It really does, you know. And then if you get into things like shh is the same thing. Look at this. You got this shh thing going on, and then what's that? A shka. You know, you got these two things combined. So now you've got another problem, because you're going to have to do some zero crossing cutting on these. On both of them, separate them, and you're going to have to deal with both of them. And things like pops, you know, pop, you know, there it is, pop, you know, does that make sense? And there it is. You can see, you can really look at the waveform density issue, you know, and with pop, you know, does that make sense? And really see that plosive, you know, and see what it looks like. Now, the issue that we're coming to when we're talking about attenuating when you should and when you shouldn't, you know, sibilance can be a huge issue. You go find zero crossing, and on sibilance, you can normally attenuate sibilance a lot, bro, and it sounds just fine. Does that make sense? You just got to be real careful whenever you're dealing with any of these things, that this is too loud, this is too quiet, and this is okay. Does that make sense? Somewhere between here and there is okay. You know, I prefer right there. Does that make sense? But you'd be surprised how much you can attenuate sibilance and things like that to where it sounds fine now. I mean, it sounds like he's going along fine, but it looks like you've attenuated that waveform out of the picture. You know, you'd be surprised how much you can attenuate that kind of stuff. The thing looks huge. You see this shh going on here. Look how big it is and how big and thick and gnarly it is. I mean, and dense. You know, you can really attenuate these a lot to try to even the flow out. Does that make sense? And it's very simply a thing about you experimenting, and it's a taste thing. Sometimes I won't fuss with it at all. I'll be like, no, I'm not fussing with that. I might attenuate it just a little bit in a couple spots, but for the most part, I'm going to leave it alone, because it's part of the performance. It's part of the performer's character, and it's really, it's great. You know, and I'm not going to fuss with it too much. That becomes an artistic decision and you dealing with the band, the actual vocalist himself, and the producer, if it's not just you, and your own ear, and becoming a tasteful engineer. And also keep in mind that you might change this. This sounds good by this track all by itself, but when you start putting this in the mix, that you might go back and go, oh, well, I attenuated that just a little bit too much, and I'm going to recut it, and I'm going to bring it up a little bit, because now in the mix, I have to re-edit it a little bit, because now it sounds really cool. Sometimes you can go ahead and listen to some of their tracks while you're doing it together, but most time when you're editing phase, you haven't gotten that far, so it's kind of hard. You can go ahead and throw some on there next to it, but they haven't been really worked on yet, so you might have to re-edit. You're going to have to learn to trust your judgment. So that's a huge concept. Tuz, cuz, and things like that. You'd be surprised on these that they can vary. Sometimes you can really attenuate the heck out of them. Sometimes you can't much, or it loses the character of the sound and you really have to fuss with it. Sometimes you want it, and then I was king for the day, and king, and you just don't want to fuss with it, or it is too much of and you want to get it down because it's too much, and sometimes it's like, and then I'm doing it, I think that's it, and then and you don't want to fuss with that. Matter of fact, you're going to want to boost it when you do some EQ work. Yeah, do it on your face, it goes that break, and then bam! And it's like, you don't want to be fussing with that too much, because you're going to ruin the whole character of the song, and it's a really needed accent that you want. And you really need to feel your way around whether or not it's good for the production or not, rather than it's sibilance and I have to take care of it because it went shka. That doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do it because shka. Yeah, it might be something really cool that adds this character to the song that when you start mixing that you didn't want to fuss with that. You EQ it a little bit later to give it some really good body and some good sound, but you don't want to attenuate it out of there because it's really doing something for the song. So really keep that in mind. But the actual dealing with it is very simple. I almost deal with all my things like that hand by hand, going and finding it. That's a duh that's too much. It just is. I don't care. I can hear it, and I know I might change it later when I start mixing, but I'm bringing it down to out there because it's too much. I want it to be an accent, but I don't want it to be that much of an accent, and I'm going to cut it, attenuate it, and bounce it, and it's good to go. And I'll do it like that because it's very easy to do that way. Now, sometimes you might run into some other algorithms. Now, that basically takes care of that for the most part. You'll run into other things. Here you are looking at the beginning of this. You're going along, and these waveforms look like nice waveforms. And, oh, what is that? It looks like a dense waveform. It's automatically a monster I have to attenuate. Is that true? No, it's not true. I mean, you might want to attenuate it a little bit. It's a little bit there going. You might not want to. You're going to have to work on, your taste. What is that? What the heck is that thing going on there? That's some kind of a vocal click or a pop or something. My lip all dry or something. I attenuate that. Maybe not. You need to make a decision on it. But you got to be real careful, because if you get wrapped up in the trap in this, that every little thing that doesn't look just like every other waveform, oh, that's a monster right there, I have to fix that. That's not necessarily true. So, you get wrapped up in this. I almost finished the sibilance thing. It's 3 weeks later, and I keep finding all these monsters all over the place that I got to fix because the waveform's denser. It's not necessarily true. So, you have to make some decisions. Sometimes it is, and you will eventually start to see and listen really acutely to when that's a problem. And then later on, does it work in the mix, or do I need to work on that and attenuate that stuff? It's a work in progress that you will just have to work at, and you will get better at doing it. And don't forget, there are programs like RX6 that'll fix mouth clicks, plosives, a DS and all kinds of things. Just be real careful with those algorithms, because some of them do really great, and they'll do really great in some instances, and sometimes they'll do auto destruction and cause a mess, and it's not, you don't really catch it until you've destroyed the piece of audio. So be real careful, because most of their algorithms do a really good job when it's not really aggressive work you have to do. But it's great. I always recommend this piece of software, something like it. I use this piece of software because I've been really happy with it and really like it. that can really help you with those things. Deep plosives, de-essing, mouth clicks, all kinds of things like that that are great. Breath control. You run into problems with breath control. It sounds funny, but you're sitting here and then, right before something, you're taking a breath, that there was a breath afterwards, and then I went on, and you want to kind of attenuate that breath out of there. Normally, it would be at the front of one of these waveforms, but here's a breath right there. That might be a little, something like that, and you want to attenuate that. Get that out of there because it's way too loud. I don't want to hear a lady, and then and I don't want to hear that. That's not cool. It doesn't sound classy, and it's like she didn't have really good control. And it might be character. Sometimes you want to leave it in there, sometimes you don't. But as you start to really visualize it and really acutely listen to it, you will start to see those things. And really just take your time and worry more about you being tasteful and doing a tasteful job in your editing rather than you're just fixing everything. That some things just don't need to be fixed. You don't need to fix it. It does not broken. It's okay. It's part of the character of what's happening. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at waveform densities and issues involved with waveform densities. And I will see you in the next video when we get into flow editing.